It'd be okay in the Seabees. That's it.
Okay, you're front and center, Bill.
That's a hard act to follow, Max. Anyway, before I introduce Terry and the team, I want to start off by saying I've been involved with the Urban Land Institute for many, many years, and for like the last 5 years, I've been on the TOD Council for ULI nationally, and I'm one of 50 people across the country who focus on transit-oriented development work. And that 3 years ago, that got me appointed to the state TOD Council by Governor Ige. And what Governor Ige is trying to do is he admits that the state of Hawaii is the largest landowner in the entire state, and that of all the land that they own, a fraction of a percentage is actually usable or used and is generating revenue. So his intention is to try to find land across the state that the state owns and might be next to some city or county lands to go on the to create transit-oriented development. And on the outer islands, it might just be a bus stop. And in the first 3 years of our doing this work, we have got a master plan that is done, and the master plan has got levels of priority based upon lots of things, like is there utilities and stuff. And but so this project is kind of near and dear to my heart, and since I've been working on TOD projects for many years now, and so one of the first projects that's out of the gate is one of the first few projects out of the gate, and one of the ones we're working on is the Aloha Stadium project. Terry McFarland is one of my partners at Tex Hawaii, and his team is Ethan Tour. Ethan is a senior associate. We have Matt Laudermilk and Michael Cognac, and I don't know if Sarah was involved with this, or she's just calling in to listen.
I'm just listening. I'm just
Okay.
in awe.
She's a gate crasher.
I'm a gate crasher.
And I have no idea who Cool is.
Bill,
Anyway.
I think you meant to say you have no idea what cool is.
Oh, that's true too.
Sorry.
I'm far from
really
it.
good with Hawaiian energy.
I heard the joke and I thought that was just a part of the meeting.
So anyway, I will turn it over to Terry and let him and his team make the presentation.
Okay, Matt, could you grab hold of the screen and get our slideshow up?
It's at, oh, here we go. Boom.
Just want to make sure, can everybody see it okay?
Hey, this
No,
is,
it's good.
hey, this is, hold on you guys. Hey, this is Rob Kinsler, the host. Look, if you notice there's a double line in the middle of your screen, you can adjust the slider to emphasize the presenter slides and de-emphasize the attendees. So I'm going to sign off.
Okay, so anyway, thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone, for inviting us over here. We are very excited about this project. We've been working on it for probably a year and a half by now. And it's much more than just the new Aloha Stadium. It's an entire entertainment district. So, and this district has a lot of stuff in it besides just the stadium. And we'll kind of go over that with you guys today. Unfortunately, we can't really give you the latest and greatest we'll be giving you stuff that's probably about 4 or 5 months old, but we can't give you the latest stuff because if we did, they'd probably want to kill us for doing it since the people who make decisions haven't seen it yet. So we can't do that. But I think what we are showing you is still going to be very informative and it'd be pretty cool. So I think one of the things that we'd like to do is just go over sort of where we are today and where we've been, how we got to where we are. And then have a little question and answer session at the end where you guys can ask us questions. And I think also, you know, we're not going to talk too much about P3, public-private partnership, in the presentation, but this is a public-private partnership project. And there's probably going to be questions about that, and we'd like to field those and answer as many as we can. We're not the experts that some of the other folks on our team are, but we know a lot about it now, a lot more than we did a year and a half ago. So next slide. So some of our team members, I don't want to go through all of them because there's a lot of them, but a lot of them on the mainland and some of them here in Hawaii as well. But the prime is Crawford Architects. They're out of Kansas City. They've done a lot of stadium. They're stadium designers. That's what they do. So they've done a lot of stadiums on the mainland. They've done stadiums in Australia. I guess the stadium kind of that they're best noted for maybe would be the Seattle Seahawks Stadium for the NFL team. And of course, then there's AHL. We're doing most all the other stuff that's not stadium oriented. And Wilson Okamoto, they're taking care of the EIS, which is got to be done for this project, big project. Onua is our cultural consultants. Compact is taking care of the community outreach, and that's a really big thing in this project, actually. WT Partnership from the mainland, they're the P3 experts. They've worked on quite a number of projects with Crawford Architects, P3 projects with Crawford Architects in the past. So those guys work really well together. They know exactly what needs to be done, and it's been real educational for us to work with those guys. From the state, of course, there's DAG, Department of Accounting General Services. They manage the project. There's the Stadium Authority, and there's HCDA. And HCDA will probably in the near future be handing most of their responsibilities over to the Stadium Authority. Next slide. So stadium, as we know it, is about 45 years old now. It's been around a while. It's you know, been the home of all kinds of sporting events, concerts. I mean, you name it, and it's you guys have been here. You know exactly what it's been. Tons of stuff. So one of the things that we've been working on is Architects Hawaii over the past 10 years is keeping this stadium running well. It's made of mostly of Corten steel, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but that's been a real issue with rusting problems, which of course everybody knows about. Next slide. So a little bit of history first. We'll go all the way back to November 11th of 1926. That's when old Honolulu Stadium opened, and they're at the corner of King and Eisenberg, and probably a lot of you guys might remember that. It was constructed entirely out of wood, and needless to say, it got the nickname of the Termite Palace for obvious reasons, being all made out of wood. It was, at the time, the largest wood structure in the United States, and probably if it was around today, it'd probably still be the largest wood structure. Seated about 25,000, which is fairly large. UH played football there. Major League Baseball actually played there. The New York Yankees played there, and then a couple other teams played there. Babe Ruth played there. Joe DiMaggio hit the longest home run in that stadium. Hawaii Islanders baseball team was there. Poi Bowl, Pineapple Bowl. Next slide. Even in 1957, Elvis had a concert there. There was stock car racing, track and field. A lot of the same stuff, really, that the current stadium has. It performed just the same. Then and it went all the way until 1975. It was closed in 1975, and that's when the Aloha Stadium that we know today opened up, and then it was demolished in 1976. So next slide. So the new stadium was opened in 1975 for a price tag of $32 million, which sounds like one heck of a deal today. But maybe back then that was a lot of money. I don't know. It just seems like a really good deal right now. But it did a lot of things that old Honolulu Stadium couldn't do. Honolulu Stadium didn't have much parking. The new stadium had 40 times the parking stalls that the old one had. It was a really good multi-purpose venue. It had 4 movable grandstands, so it was able to move around for baseball, football, soccer, different sporting events. And I think that went on until probably the mid or late 90s when they finally stopped it, couldn't do it anymore, and it's now in place and won't move. It's got about 50,000 seating capacity. Same thing as the old stadium, lots of concerts, auto shows, tractor pulls, monster trucks, and even some of the things that were outside of the stadium, swap meet, state fair. You know, there's 99 acres out there, so a lot of it has been used for a lot of really good reasons. So next slide. So you can see this on a construction photo, and you can see all the steel that was there, and it was Core 10 steel. And the Core 10 steel is probably most of you know, back in the 70s was used a lot. And on the mainland, it worked really well. It got sort of a coating of rust on it, and then it stopped rusting, and you didn't have to maintain it. Basically, it just had this orangish color to it, and it just stayed like that forever. But unfortunately, in Hawaii, with our marine environment and the humidity, etc., that didn't happen. It just kept rusting. So, you know, for the past 10 years, AHL has been trying to keep that stadium in business. So it's been really tough. One of the other things that it really lacks is it doesn't have much technology. You know, it just really 1980s, 1970s technology for the most part. It doesn't have skyboxes and the things that, you know, most people would expect to see in a facility like this these days, restaurants, corporate boxes. It just is really hard pressed to do any of that. And there's a few more slides you can see under construction, the steel, just keep moving past that. So today, Aloha Stadium today, Aloha Stadium today is pretty much what I just said. It's been doing today just exactly what it's been doing all these years. The big problem now is that, you know, with the new stadium coming on, the legislature is really not funding this project, this building to be maintained anymore. So it might be that in the future we actually have to close down parts of the stadium because it may not be safe to have people in it. So it will be interesting to see what happens in the next several years until the new facility is built. Next slide. So some of the things, of course, so I just talked about the swap meet. That's been going on, believe it or not, since 1979. 41 years the swap meet's been around. It's open 3 days a week right now, and it's actually one of the largest contributors to stadium income, and it doesn't even happen inside the stadium. Pretty wild. And then next slide, 50th State Fair. Another thing, that thing that happens on the site. What I'd like to do is have Michael now sort of run through, you know, I've talked about the history a little bit. So now what we need to do is we need to start talking about, do we renovate or do we replace? We had to go through a whole process to decide what we wanted to do there. Couldn't just decide to tear it down. So what is that process, and what were the decision-making sort of steps that we went through? And Michael's going to go through that real quick.
Yep, sounds good. Yeah, so that was the question that was proposed, or should we rebuild it or just keep maintaining it? So I think Architects Wise has spent to this day about $100 million in maintenance fees, and it's about $30 million every year to maintain this facility, just through all the different types, steel, concrete. You can go to the next one, Matt. And so this just looks at the background, just looking at the history of the project. It's not something that's just been around for a few years. It's been about 15 years since 2005 when the initial planning studies were going on. So it's gone through many iterations, and now we're finally getting to a point where it's realized that we should not maintain it, but build a new stadium. And so this goes into, with Crawford, they did an extensive site selection process where, you can go to the next one, Matt. Started with 18 initial site locations, looking at all the parks and areas that initially that could just handle the size of the stadium, and then bringing that down to 9 to seeing where it could even be allowed. And from there, they kind of narrowed it to 6 sites and evaluated those. And after all the site selection process, in the end, it looks like the best fit was to keep the stadium at the original location instead of moving it to another park or golf course or open green space. Yeah, you can go to the next one, Matt. So NASED, this is just a terminology that's been came from the new Aloha Stadium Entertainment District. So this is just a special district that's going to have its own set of rules and such that's going to be following. And one of the key concepts is we want to incorporate live, work, and play. So keeping it not just a secluded area, but for the community to use and be able to Matt, you can go to the next one. And at the community outreach, these were meetings that have gone on through the past number of years. And this is just basically where, after taking all these things, such as the site selection analysis, or bringing it down to what you see in the background is 3 boards, option A, B, and C, and just bringing the community in and asking what they want out of this project. We tried to gather in a few groups at every community meeting, 5 to 6 groups, and every table that sat down had a purpose or goal. And so we would get comments from the community here and summarize them all and try to incorporate them as much as we could into the new master plan.
And along with that process, the team made these 3 kind of conceptual programmatic master plans with these original 3 options. They had options A, B, and C. Where basically they were looking at the different routes to build the new stadium, where option A is build it in place by just rebuilding a piece at a time and letting the whole stadium kind of operate as a whole, still kind of around the construction. Option B being moving the stadium, building it next to it while using the old stadium, and then demolishing the old after the new one is operational. And then option C being the same, but just south of the existing site rather than west, and then really breaking up that existing grid, which we can actually pull up a video real quick. That's really a fun look at the 3 different options. So here, most of the taller towers or taller buildings are going to be residential, a couple hotel, a good amount of office space, but then most of the ground floor is retail. Option A really kept most of the existing kind of structure to the site, leaving a large majority of surface parking, but then really making sure they built up some tower residential presence here around the heart site, because all 3 options are really looking at getting that pedestrian connection between the heart site in conjunction with the Aloha TOD plan, of course. And then option B. Option B, which is ultimately the one that got further studies, we can't show you more of at the moment, like Terry said. This one is showing the stadium on the west side, and then the kind of depression where the stadium was originally sitting kind of gets reused into like a park or a green space, amphitheater of sorts, since it will already be a whole. But then there's generally this radial structure with shared structured parking and then residential towers, really kind of building up more of a district feel and less of a big surface parking lot like we have out there now. And then just more residential office down that main street. and then option C, which is still keeping the same connection to the Heartline, but then it draws a straight line across the site and really puts in this orthogonal grid to take you back down south and centering back around the park again, but much more traditionally laid out, and just another option that we're going to be able to keep it open for the developing team that does take over the project to really know that they have these in their arsenal to apply to their design when they start to think about how they want to use this site. But then also you can see we still really like the idea of being connected to its neighborhood connections. There's some trailways and pathways in here that even has a good wiggle on the Aloha stream, which is something that is in our thought and perspective is revitalizing that stream and bringing people down to it somehow. Go back to this. If Ethan, you want to take over and close this out?
Yeah, no problem. Before I do, does anyone have any questions about what you've seen so far, or shall we get to the end and then do a Q&A? Okay, no response means we'll go all the way through to the end. Just going to get a little bit more specific about, you know, some of the events, some of the tenants that may be involved in the state. There's some highlighted elements there. Some of these elements have been at the stadium previously, but, you know, there's more attention given to things like rugby. Esports is becoming pretty big with some of the younger generations in both high school and collegiate competition. You've got your combat sports, you know, NFL and CFL exhibition, in addition to some of the other things that we've all gone to before, football, 50th State Fair, you know, some motocross and things like that. So a lot of stuff going on at the stadium. Next slide, please. Again, another thing to kind of take into consideration is that the program is for approximately 35,000 seats. There's a study that's behind that as well, kind of taking into consideration, you know, the existing stadium capacity and what the new stadium capacity should be. There's some other things here that you could read through as well for the stadium program that are being taken into consideration. Next slide, please. So we're not going to zoom in to the charts that are off to the right, but again, we wanted to talk a little bit about, well, what's in the stadium. And there are going to be obviously retail elements that are part of the stadium. There's going to be a Hall of Fame area as you approach and enter the stadium. Premium food and beverage, obviously, you know, that seems to be a growing trend at all modern stadia across the country. And then we start to get down to some of the sporting events, including soccer, football, which football may be the same thing as soccer, depending on where you're from, rugby, concerts, esports, and those sorts of things that we had mentioned. The concerts, interestingly enough, in one of the concepts or in multiple of the concepts, can occur not just within the stadium for someone who's a big draw, but also, you know, maybe during the 50th State Fair, or during, you know, someone who might not be as big of a draw. There'd be an outdoor amphitheater, roughly the size of the Shell in Waikiki. Next slide. So there's a continuation there, the 35,000 seats, of which 2,200 roughly would be premium seats. So those, you know, boxes, suites, clubs, the loge area, the digital display board that's planned to be two-sided, I should say, so that you get a chance to actually be a part of the scoreboard from outside the stadium, or potentially if there's a game going on that is an away game, that people could come to the amphitheater and watch the away game together. So that's you know, something that's being programmed as well. And then obviously flexibility. So that's really, it's not the same type of flexibility that the Rust bucket, you know, kind of shut itself down and don't have football and baseball in different configurations. That's not the idea. It's just program flexibility so that the different tenants and users of the facility have something that's generic enough to be able to accommodate as many events as possible. Next slide. So this gets into the vision of the future and really, you know, the project vision. You guys can read through this. But I did highlight a couple things that are really important. You know, it is about younger generations and the spirit of achievement, thrill of competition, and then last but not least, you know, pride and, you know, the feeling of aloha. There were some objectives in some of the meetings that occurred in the community that were very much consensus building. Some of the community meetings were more targeted to be with the stadium authority. Others were more targeted to be with the swap meet vendors themselves. And then really, so when you get down to the second highlighted phrase, an executable development plan. So oftentimes you guys might see master plans or development plans that look great, but they're not executable. They're not affordable. You know, they wind up collecting dust on a shelf. So that was one of the objectives as well, was to have an executable development plan, which meant that this project surely had to be phased. And so there is a first phase, second phase, third phase approach. There are going to be many phases, obviously determined by the developer and the general contractor, which within each of the main phases. But this first phase approach really includes the new stadium. Next slide. Again, this was kind of a little bit of a highlight as far as people that we were speaking to in the community. So you see existing stadium, you know, community groups, local business and small business in the area, you know, within the Salt Lake area at the Ice Palace and those, you know, the malls that are directly across the street from the stadium. Next slide. And it's really important to point out, so when we take a look at the studies that were done, both to determine the 35,000 seats, to determine the commercial, retail, residential program, the square footage that would be allotted for each of those, the number of parking spaces that the development plan is supposed to accommodate. These are market studies that have been done previously, and we, as designers, then obviously receive that information and interpret that into architecture. Next slide. This slide just talks about the process previously and where we are today, which is the red dashed line. So we're looking at, you know, roughly a year and a half, 2 years ago, the development plan being put together with DAGs. The engagement in the RFQ process in taking a look at qualified developer teams and what their qualifications actually are. So those were submitted. DAGs, I know, is at the point now where they're taking a look, although we don't know who they will select, but once they take a look and shortlist the RFQ respondents, then a request for proposal will be submitted to those particular entities. Looking at final selection and financial close, roughly Q4 of 2020, and then project delivery happening in between a 2 to 3 year span thereafter. So this is important because, again, it talks about the phasing. This is part of phase one is what you see in bold, which is the stadium. It'll include some residential component, the improvements that are going to be occurring at the rail station, that is the Halava rail station, some of the commercial improvements that would be on site, and entertainment and hotel, with again, some of that program happening in subsequent phases. So not everything is being built at once here. Next slide. Again, just kind of talks about with the requests for qualifications, where we are. That's the highlighted and red arrow there. That DAGS is shortlisting the, you know, down to 3 respondent teams. Next slide. And we finally get to the end. So take your screenshots now, write down the website address if you want to kind of follow up and see what the progress is on NASED or New Aloha Stadium Entertainment District. And appreciate you all being.
Yeah. Ethan, I wanted to throw in one additional comment here that, the options, the schemes, the site, the A, B, and C that the video showed, those are actually those are studies that we did. We're not suggesting that a developer would have to follow any of them. Basically what that is we take all the program that the studies have given us that say you need this many square feet of office, you need this many square feet of retail, et cetera, et cetera. So then we need to lay that out on the site to see, does it actually fit? And if it does fit, what kind of massing is involved? How big of a project does it get to be? So we went through that exercise, and we went through 3 different options to find out, what some of the ways that it could be done to give the developer teams a few options looking at, and we would expect that they would either take one of those options and expand upon it, or take their own option and work it out. It's up to them actually as to what they wanted to do. So that's kind of where we are right now. I guess what we can do is just, unless Matt, you want to show a few of these, maybe just show a few of these stills, and then we can have questions and answers. So as you can see, it is a stadium, but it's far more than just a stadium.
I've really just looked back through them a couple times. Just kind of some of the good pedestrian moments of actually kind of being down in it is nice.
Yeah. So I guess at this point, we would open up to you guys for questions that you may have, and I'm sure you have some.
I have one question. Sorry about this question, but depending on what happens with social distancing and how long that's going to be with us, is that being looked at, or we're just assuming that we're going to be going back to normal pretty soon?
Yeah, that at this time that has not been looked at, and I think the assumption is we will be going back to I don't know if it'll be back to where we were, but back to a different place. I'm not sure in the RFP, WT Partners may bring something up, some written part of the RFP may address that. I'm not sure, I haven't seen that yet.
So Bill, there haven't been any design adjustments associated with that, but I don't know if you caught the open games for Major League Baseball, and there's some cardboard cutouts sitting in the stands now in Major League Baseball stadiums.
Hey, this is Rob Kinslow. My question is, so given that what I heard you say that these 3 designs, A, B, and C, are just proposed kind of layouts and not actually what the contractor and the down-selected developer would do, what can we say about how the footprint of the current stadium relates to the footprint of the new stadium? By that, I mean just the aerial plan form footprint of the stadium.
In terms of size, you're talking about like how much larger is it or smaller is it?
Yeah, it appears that the designs you're showing are a little bit smaller and a little bit more vertical than, that's just my sense of it, maybe I'm wrong. And just wondering, like, was the stadium size, since it goes from 50 to 35, seems like it's smaller and more vertical and what the, in other words, it seems like the current stadium is going to be bigger than the future stadium in terms of footprint.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. I think there is an option though to increase from 35 to 40,000 with temporary seating if there's an event that would require that. But from the studies that Crawford did, 35,000 seemed to be the right number, and 50,000 seemed to be too large. And I think throughout a lot of the United States, universities seem to be, for college events, for UH, that seemed to be a good number.
And then my other question is about traffic and drainage. Any consideration? I'm sure there was considerations there. Could you talk about a little bit about that?
Yeah, so maybe Michael, you and Matt should talk about traffic and drainage. Both of you guys have studied that for quite a while. And it looks like they're going to go find another drawing here to show you.
Hey, Mike, is this the best drawing here for you?
Oh yeah, I think this explains it pretty good.
Oh, actually,
Just for traffic and circulation.
is that Terry?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, go ahead, put that up. That's okay.
okay.
We maintain the circulation out when we go to the H3 and to the H1 and back to Salt Lake.
So
I guess
there's-
another important thing we can see here now also is the bollards. One thing that is interesting on this site is that if you look at the top left entrance and the bottom right, you can see that there's that.
Michael, you're breaking up.
We lost you, Mike.
I think we lost them altogether, yeah. So one of the things that we were talking about, and Matt, maybe you could get your cursor there to show it a little bit, but to get people off of Salt Lake Boulevard, we've actually gotten get them into the site and have them queue up on site basically instead of on the street. So we have areas where they can queue up prior to a game or after a game leaving, so that they don't get into all the major streets. That's one of the criticisms that the folks when we had these community events where they said, gee, it's really terrible because I can't even get to my house when there's an event happening. So we're trying to help them so that that doesn't happen, or at least it happens minimally compared to the way it is happening now.
Also, this is we aren't even talking about gates on site anymore necessarily. The gate's going to be in structured parking, because the heavy majority of all the parking on site is now structured or garaged. And so instead of having gates that people have to queue up to on the roads, you'll just queue up at the entry to the whatever parking structure is on the site.
Yeah.
And they're talking about some technology that you could book your parking on your phone and pull up and pass, and so it'll be a whole different kind of traffic flow, ideally, and less of a gated community that you have to get into and more of a part of the context.
It's one of the things also in taking a look at some of the traffic studies would be the acknowledgement that you're going to have a lot of people hopefully riding the rail and getting off at the station. Maybe not as many cars needing to be parked or driving up and down Salt Lake Boulevard. There are strategic places on site. Some of our further studies where Uber or Lyft or those sort of rideshare programs could occur, in addition to pedestrian and bikeable opportunities. So we're starting to take a look at the connection over to EAH Elementary, the bridge connection that goes over the Camp Highway entry onto the freeway.
Yeah, as well as access into the communities in general.
Can I ask a question on this? Rob, can I ask a question on this?
Sure.
Okay, fine. I'm sorry that Hawaiian Electric's taking down a mango tree on our street. They're worried about the hurricane and the tree going down. Anyway, a quick question is, I'm looking at this. I don't see a lot of green. I'm looking at a huge heat island created. And I'm wondering if there are any environmental statements that are going to say that we are going to have more shade than what there is existing already, if we can have a comparison with what we've got and what we're going to end up with.
Did any of you guys catch, I didn't really catch his whole question.
Okay. We have a lot of green space there already.
Yeah.
We are going to create a huge heat island there. Are there any studies telling us what we have in terms of biomass now and what we're going to have in terms of ground cover and shade and all the rest of the stuff later on?
No, we haven't really done those studies because, you know, this is not really the final scheme, so we haven't really gone through that at this point. That's something that will need to be done, but it has not been done at this point.
Okay, there's just a couple of other things. Amazon have just bought 19 acres. They're going to take a lot of retail space out of the system in Hawaii. How do you think retail is going to be supported in this area? Just by the local residents?
Yeah, and maybe Ethan, I don't know if you want to respond to that, but the studies have showed that it is the local residents, it's the military, it's the tourists, it's a combination of folks that are going to be supporting the retail. And, you know, there's a built-in, you know, above the retail, there's now a built-in bunch of people, right, that are going to be using it.
Right. So I think it's not just the Salt Lake and EAH communities that have opportunities for retail or even needs for retail. But the amount of people that are anticipated to move into this whole development, you know, from a residential standpoint, will increase the need as well. As far as the square footage, what we can say is, you know, that we're looking at multiple opportunities for both, you know, small scale mom and pop local shops, as well as kind of medium box. We're not anticipating a large box, you know, or shopping center to be in this development, but there are just a lot of different opportunities for mixed retail.
Not to mention the swap meet will still be functioning on site as well, and so there's that kind of synchronized between the two of them.
Can I ask why we're not covering the parking? Real estate in Hawaii is extremely expensive. You've got a parking lot there that doesn't have any trees in it. Can we do the greenest parking lot, make it 2 stories, kind of like the city and county parking lot that we have at Frank Fasty building?
Yeah, we have schemes that do that. We have both schemes. You know, we have, and that's why we put these options together. There are some options where there's very little surface parking. It's almost all structured parking. And then we've tried to look at the other side as well, which you're looking at right there, where we've done, it showed surface parking as well.
Gary, I have a question for you. Would this classify as transit-oriented development in some fashion? And what is the is a net zero cost to taxpayers because of all the other mechanisms to sell housing, et cetera?
Yeah, it is in the TOD district. And Bill, I know you're the TOD sort of expert here, if you want to comment on that. The legislature has put up, I think they want to put up $350 million as part of the state's money to fund this. It's obviously going to be a lot more than that, but that's to get this developer going, and that way the state still has a say in what happens. And Bill, you want to talk about TOD?
Well, officially, the TOD zones are generally how far you have to walk to get to a train or a bus stop. And ideally, the TOD falls within a quarter mile of it, because that's an easy, 5-minute walk. But TOD actually for Hawaii extends out a half mile because of the climate here and the ease of, we don't have severe winters or anything, so it's a little easier to go a half mile here in Hawaii. But so that's, we have the half mile here. So anything within a half mile of the train station is a TOD. The city has gone through and done their own community hearings, community meetings. They've gone through, done their own planning studies, and they will be finalizing their TOD overlay plan and rezoning on this as soon as we get some feedback on what the developer is really going to end up, being able to build.
Yeah, but the whole site, I believe the whole site is within the TOD zone.
Yeah, it's all within half mile. Yeah.
May I ask, has there been any overlay on solar possibilities on this site? Solar electricity?
Yeah, we've got, and then Michael, you might want to, or Matt, you guys might want to talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, we've done studies on that, and there's quite a bit of solar on it. And actually, Matt, you might want to talk about the water too, because we didn't really talk too much about that.
We didn't really get into too much the nitty-gritty on it all, but basically within the design guidelines, we are talking about a district chilled water plant for general building cooling across the district scale, just to maintain efficiencies. And also you can see on top of these buildings in this option A here, any vacant rooftops are expected to use those spaces for either green roofs, for reducing urban heat islands and things like that, and water runoff filtration, but also for solar panels. So those are both mentioned and encouraged in the, or mandated in the design guidelines for sure.
And then one of the things to mention, I think there was a question about, I don't know, it was about drainage. So one of the further studies off of these design concepts does take a look at the natural slope from Aloha Stadium down to Halava Stream. And so we're taking a look at, we're not civil engineers. We haven't done calculations as far as surface area and grassed area or permeable and non-permeable, but we're taking a look at opportunities to be able to handle the drainage in a very natural way, so that it would flow through bioswales and rain gardens before it goes down to the stream, getting kind of filtered naturally. On the solar side, when we take a look at some of our parking garage options, there's opportunity, instead of having cars park on the top level, that we would be able to create, parking garage, roof deck, solar farms.
Yeah, and the minimum is LEED silver on this. And it's interesting, I talked to Crawford because we really don't have experience. How does a stadium get to LEED silver? Is that hard to do? And they said, no, it's fairly easy to do. So even the stadium will be a LEED silver at minimum.
Would you consider this development middle class or upper middle class? Because one of the things is I see you have a lot of cars there. I've seen a talk that was 7 years old, came from New South Wales Sydney University in Australia, and the man made the statement that by 2025 it would be 5 times cheaper to have an app on your phone than it would be to own a car. And I don't believe that Hawaii is going to do anything but go in that direction.
Yeah. I don't know what to say.
We're definitely thinking about other kind of like parking reductions that we could take advantage of because of transit, and also people maybe not owning cars, and having a mix of high-end and kind of affordable housing throughout the site.
Yeah, one of the things we are I think will be in the RFP, but don't quote me on this, but it's in our design studies as well, as all the parking structures. We have a floor-to-floor height on the first floor much higher to allow for future development in that parking structure of something other than parking. So if need for parking becomes less, those floor areas can be used for other things.
So I have a few questions. My name is John Kawamoto, and I've been a UH football fan for a long time, going back to the old stadium on King Street. And I'm also a member of Faith Action for Community Equity, which is an advocate for social justice, including affordable housing. So my questions are, so I understand the stadium won't be able to pay for operations largely because of declining UH football attendance. So the mixed use part of the project will subsidize the stadium part. Is that true? Okay, that's the first question. The second question is, the legislature rejected this Aloha Stadium bill just about a week ago. So how does that affect the development of the stadium? And the third question is, how much of the development plan is locked in? Is it still changeable? Or all those floor areas, for the different purposes, is that all locked in? So, and I guess depending on the answers, I might have a comment later. So thank you.
Okay, maybe go backwards, I guess, maybe on this. As far as the studies that were done, that locked in our study. However, if a developer team, and they will do their own studies, right? They're going to do that. And if their studies show that that's not how it should be this way, and they're, we have our guys look at it and they agree with them, then that's what it would be. So I don't think we're locked into those numbers right now, but those are the numbers that our guys are telling us. And if somebody comes up with new numbers and they can validate those new numbers, we're not going to dig our heels in and say, no, I'm sorry, you can't do it. You have to do what we say, even though it might not be right. So things change as time goes by, right? I mean, when COVID's here and wasn't here when we did the study, right? So it can be different. Second one was the legislature didn't actually turn it down. They just didn't vote on it. They left it just ride. And the reason they did that was because there was some, in the bill, there was some parts, one part of it that actually was incorrect, and it tied HCDA to something that they didn't want to be tied to. They typically have 65-year leases on their property, and the stadium is going to have 99-year leases, I believe. And the way it was written, it tied HCDA into 99-year leases, and of course they didn't want that. So the bill is being supported. It just can't be passed because of what the wording wasn't right. So they have to change the wording and then re-vote on the bill. And it's possible that we maybe have to wait all the way till next year till the legislature comes back into session. But it's possible maybe to get this on a special session, because I think the state's going to get some federal monies for COVID. And they need to find out what to do with that money. And so they're going to have a special session that they need to have to find out where that money is going to go. And I think DAGS is going to try to get the stadium put back in to that discussion so that it can be moved forward a little bit faster. But it's by no means is it dead. We're still working on the project full speed ahead. It hasn't stopped us at all. And so it's still moving forward, and it still has support. The first question, I don't know if I can really answer that. I guess you'd have to ask the people who did the financial analysis to answer that question. But I would only say that I would guess that all the activities that happen in the stadium are gonna sort of promote the stadium's financial well-being. So I think UH is program will just be one of those things. There'll be concerts, there'll be all kinds of things that go in there. And I think once we have a facility that can handle all that stuff and do it really well, I think we're going to become much more popular for different events. So, and I think that it's up to the developers to, because they're the ones who are going to be running the stadium, right? So it's up to them to start to push for that. So I guess I can't really totally answer the first question.
So I guess my comment on the overall design is that, you know, I know there were these public meetings, and I went to a couple of them, and, you know, maybe there were 100 people there. But, you know, there have been surveys of Hawaii residents, you know, broad-based surveys, and the surveys indicate that affordable housing is Hawaii's biggest need. There was one survey that said the top concern of Hawaii's residents was the cost of living, and housing is the biggest item in most families' budget. The second biggest concern was affordable housing itself. And the third biggest concern was homelessness. And of course, homelessness is caused largely by the lack of, or the shortage of affordable housing. So the stadium site, since it has about 40 acres not designated for the stadium and affiliated parking, the current plan envisions a mixed-use district with some housing, but it could accommodate tens of thousands of affordable housing units. And it's a perfect place for affordable housing because it's next to a rail station and it's state land. So the development of housing, the financing is made a lot easier because the land doesn't have to be bought. So if there's, say, 20,000 affordable housing units built there, it would accommodate perhaps 50,000 people. And that would be, you know, potential customers for all the events happening at Aloha Stadium. So I just present that as an idea to this group that would satisfy Hawaii's huge affordable housing needs while making the Aloha Stadium complex idea more financially viable. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, John. Those are very good comments.
Can I respond to those comments? Because, I mean, the trend on the mainland is that they have public housing areas, they have affordable housing areas. They used to put them in their own little blocks, and so you could always drive by. You knew where the projects were, you know, and they've been taking out the projects and infusing that with other types of housing, because, you know, the folks that don't have much money living in those, you know, really wanted to be more mixed in with the rest of the community. And as it turns out, in a lot of these major cities, they're bringing in wealthy people into these areas. So you want a mixed use, mixed income, you know, type of scenario. We don't want to just cater to workforce housing, because workforce housing doesn't, you know, the construction costs for workforce housing or affordable housing cost the same as, or not much, you know, it's not much more expensive to do something that's higher end, because the cost is in the, you know, is in the facility, not the finishes. So, and the developer has to be able make and make this thing pencil out. So what the public-private partnership will do is we'll find out what that mix is. And HCDA and probably the state of Hawaii will mandate a certain number of affordable housing units on there, but it'll allow the developer then to do a market rent, market rate, and higher end units there if it seems reasonable and viable to do that. Because if you don't give the developer, there's very few developers that'll go after this if 100% of the residential units is affordable. So and the trend is to try to get a mixture of incomes together so that and in Hawaii that makes perfect sense because we're in this together, aloha and everything like that. So I don't think there's a lot to worry about, but because there will be some affordable housing, but it'll also be offer the other housing types for other people.
So I agree that residents of different income levels should be mixed together, and this should be a mixed-use development. There should be lots of commercial, especially on the ground floor, with grocery stores and mom and pop stores and retail stores and gyms and that kind of thing.
That's the exact intention, yeah.
Because that would create a walkable community, reducing the need for personal vehicles, and much more environmentally conscious. But affordable housing can be mixed in with higher end housing. It's been done already.
Yes.
And the affordable housing is subsidized
Yes.
by government. Lots of affordable housing can be built here. It's one of the few city or state sites near the rail line that's this big that can accommodate so much affordable housing. So it's a
there's
great
affordable housing.
There's affordable housing that, if not built here, will be lost.
What was it? There is a affordable housing.
HHFDC.
HHFDC, yeah, actually has a site that's in the TOD overlay zone, and they're planning on expanding as well. So that is, it's not just here, but the state owns a lot more land than this, and so that's being planned on as well.
Yeah, so the state needs tens of thousands of affordable units statewide. And, some affordable housing is being built now. A lot of it is being built on private land, making the costs higher. But this is public land. So the cost of construction will be reduced considerably.
May I interject here because we've come toward the end of our typical time limit. We will be able to continue hosted by Robert after we officially make our 1 o'clock time. Definitely thanking Terry and his team and Bill for bringing this together. And comments like yours, John. We will, at this point, Bill will have any closing comments on our talk today, any summary, and then we'll close the meeting.
Oh, I mean, I've been going to the mainland, looking at TOD projects, and this TOD project ranks up with anything I've ever seen. So it's using all of the design concepts. It's just it's it's a world-class project that we're seeing here, and compared to anything on the mainland, it's at least equal.
Thank you, Bill.
And so thank you, Terry and team, and I know we're all busy, and I appreciate you making the time for this.
Thank you.
Thank
guys.
you for inviting us.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Very much.
Appreciate you all. Good job.
Okay.
Thanks.
Are we still going to have
Thanks.
questions?
We're gone.
Send them to me, Michael.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you,
Okay, I will,
Ethan.
Bill.
All right,
Thanks.
okay, we'll have an open forum at this point. The formal time has been reached.
I have another meeting, so I have to